Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to a new fall athletics season, and welcome to this edition of the In the Bullseye podcast. I'm Voice of the Bulls, Paul Peck, joined, as always, by Vice President and Director of Athletics, Mark Allnut. You have been doing this a while, and I suspect that you're going to say when this time of year rolls around, a week out from the first football game, there's still an excitement and anticipation. This is still a fun time of the year for you, isn't it?
It always is. I mean, you talk about football starting for us next week, as I mentioned earlier offline here, that this is Happy College Football Day. This is FCS. They kick. I mean, there's a full slate of games today, but even before that, when you look at just the energy, the anticipation, the excitement of when all of our students come back to campus, and we enjoy being here in the summer all alone. With select few teams here, camps, what have you, but once the student body gets here, I mean, things just kind of pick up.
It's life and energy on this campus,
without a doubt. So yeah, I mean, this time of year is exciting, and there's a lot that's happening. There's a lot that's going to be happening. So I'm really looking forward to this 26-27 year.
All right, as we record this, we are a week away from the start of the football season, as the Bulls will open at home against Albany over at Broadview Stadium. Pete Lembo's team was just over there today working on some mock scenarios and things like that. So I know, so there's a lot that's going into it. First game is always important. It's always exciting. First game under the new Broadview Stadium sponsorship. I know that's a big moment for this school and this athletic department.
Oh, without a doubt. I think, as you look at it, it's just obviously the preparation that goes into it. We talk about, our student athletes, the team itself, all the hard work they're putting in to prepare for this kickoff against Albany. But then you also talk about our staff and what they're doing behind the scenes, whether it's a guy like Matt Walford and what he's doing to just make sure everything is on point and ready to go from a video and audio production standpoint.
It's a lot of work making us look good,
exactly
isn't it?
Right. From our facilities folks, from our external folks. I mean, everything that's going on in regards to promoting our games, getting the word out there, getting people to come to our games. One exciting aspect that I'm looking forward to is a partnership that we have with Student Life is really going to enhance our student experience at games. When you look at the northeast end zone out there by the Murchie Family Fieldhouse, there's going to be an area, a lot of tents you'll see, a lot of activities, free food giveaway for students. So, we're really putting emphasis in terms of bringing our student body up here because, as we all know, what energy they bring to games. And then, another tradition of mine outside of our long-standing tradition of doing this podcast is I had the opportunity to, visit our band and Dazzlers last night at a practice in the field house again. And James Mock, I mean, he's
Jim does a great job with those guys.
Do a shout out here because he reminded me, actually he didn't remind me, he told me that this is year 25 for him. So we're going to have to honor him in some way. 25 years been our band director, which, they have record numbers, and it's just great to really show my thanks and get in front of them. So a lot of moving pieces, but at the end of the day, we want to put our best foot forward for all those folks that are going to be coming to Broadview Stadium. We want to put on a good show, which I know Pete is preparing his team hard to put on a good show. And then at the end, we want them to come back for homecoming, which is a little earlier this year, but I think it was all said and done. Our staff's working extremely hard and looking forward for the year.
Yeah, next Thursday, September, is the 7 p.m. kickoff against Albany to get it started. All right, you used the phrase moving pieces, and I don't know that there's a better way to describe the football side of what is going on here for Pete Lembo and his team. It's the nature of what college football is now, that the Bulls come into the season with 51 new players, returning only 5 starters. There are so many questions, and even Pete has relayed how there are questions in his mind, that he loves and knows the guys that he's going to rely on, but we haven't seen the tangible proof of so many players that are going to be keys to this team's success. So somebody who's been around this sport all your life, what are your expectations and questions and anticipation about the football side of what's going to start next week?
Well, I think the expectations for me is that I trust, Pete Lembo and his staff to be able to, mesh together this group of individuals. I mean, the thing that I hear consistently over the past, 8 months now since they've been here on campus is, how hard this group works, and how they've really kind of meshed together. Again, as I mentioned before, cohesive group. They're taking coaching. They're bringing some energy and enthusiasm to everything that they approach. So, Yeah, I mean, every year it's going to be a different story, but I think for us it's just understanding that, you know what, I trust the staff to put the right pieces in place so we can be able to, put it together for Albany. And as you know, you're not going to have your best game against Albany. Really, for us is what are we looking like in November when those games matter and those can position us for a postseason berth. So, yeah, it's going to be some work in progress, but, I think that the thing is that, we're going to start identifying, some of those folks that maybe weren't here last year, some of those folks that, they might have been here last year, but now there's a new role. And then, I think at the end of the day is you'll see a group of young men that are hungry and ready to play hard.
And I think if some of those numbers that I throw out might worry a Bulls fan, all I can say to you is that most of the league is in the same boat as well.
Yeah, and I say that to a lot of people where they're having one-on-ones or, in front of groups, is that this is not a Buffalo-specific issue. I mean, this issue is not even a Mid-American Conference issue. I mean, this is the landscape that we're in, and at the end of the day, we can talk about rev share and the amount of dollars that are thrown. But again, I think it's also incumbent upon our program to be great evaluators, of talent, very similar like it was before in the past, where we weren't going to be able to bring in those 4-star, 5-star kids. But you know what, we were able to make our niche on finding those ones that might have been under the radar, but you know what, did something special for us.
Yeah, you talked about the schedule. It starts with Albany. Then the Bulls will go on the road for 2 straight weeks down to Miami to take on Florida International, then to Penn State, and then back home again for Robert Morris before the Mid-American Conference schedule kicks in. So the one quirk of the schedule this year is the 2 FCS games, right? Albany and Robert Morris. Explain why, and I feel like I have to tell everybody that when you're in that boat now, you got to get 7 wins to be bowl eligible, unlike the 6 that we're all trained to think about.
That is correct. You're allowed 1 FCS win to count to bowl eligibility, so we can't count 2. How we got to this place, very, very good question. It was, part of bringing in UMass into the Mid-American Conference. We're going to have a home game against UMass this year from a non-conference standpoint. So once that happened, we had to find a home opponent. Okay, there was options for us to travel away. Those options weren't the best. Going to the West Coast, for example, or even playing a second guarantee game. So for us, as I looked at it from a strategy standpoint, I'm looking at this knowing that we're going to have a head coach that's in year 3. So I just wanted to position that program for us to have, number one, a home game, to have 6 home games for our fans out there. Last year we had 7, but I don't want to go below 6 if at all possible, and to also try to find an opportunity for a win, more than anything. So again, I think reps are important. When I talk about reps, plays, opportunities, and as we continue to build upon the season, to position us for November. But I mean, you are right. It's going to be 7 wins for us to get to a bowl game, but I'm hopeful that this decision that I made strategically to be able to have a home game and to be able to have an opponent that can give us some momentum going into our October schedule.
Yeah, and real briefly touch on how the Florida International and then the Penn State games kind of come about and what you're looking to accomplish there.
Yeah, our scheduling philosophy and Pete and I have been on the same page with this is typically we want to play one what they call guarantee game against a P4 program, which we have that in Penn State, and then typically we want to have 2 comparable group of 6 type games, which we've had in the past. And again, UMass would have been that second group of 6 game that we had. So we couldn't find a group of 6 on the home. So again, we landed with FCS. So 1 FCS, 1 guarantee, and 2 group of 6. You'll see that constant as we move forward in the future.
All right. Going to be fun. A Florida Nationals place Bulls have never played before, kind of a fun trip.
Plenty of alums.
I was going to say always a lot of alums in Florida. And then, Penn State is one of the marquee stadiums and settings and venues in all of college football, and it's going to be fun. Their stadium's in the midst of being rebuilt, and so there's a lot of good things going on there. And again, it's only a 5-hour-ish drive, less than that, I think, from here. So if you want a road trip to one of the great venues of college football, come see the Bulls when they play at Penn State. All right, we'll get back to football towards the end of this conversation. But let's talk a little bit about what else is going on. Soccer season has already started. They're undefeated at home. They will host Binghamton on Sunday. Sean Burke's got his team as another year where he goes in as one of the top teams in the conference.
Yeah, Mr. Consistency, right? When we talk about Sean Burke and the job he's doing with that program, to be able to start off with those first 2 home wins is significant. It's tough road trip for them, but just the resiliency of that group, I feel that they'll come back and put it all out there as we continue this Sunday. And, a couple more matches before you get to Mid-American Conference play. But, for us, he feels and understands that, they're going to have that bullseye kind of on their back, especially when it comes to Mid-American Conference play. And, we'll be one of the top teams, and it's going to, again, it's not there because, hey, we're Buffaloes. It's there because, again, the work that's put into the program. So excited about where we are there and looking forward to, following that season with a trip.
And volleyball gets started as we record this on Friday on the road. And, again, that's a program under Scott Smith that continues to kind of take steps to inch their way up towards the top of the MAC. Is that what you expect? Is that what Scott expects again this year?
Yeah, I think so. Again, it's, the conference is very competitive in volleyball, and there's some mainstays out there. But then there's programs like us that, the last few years, we've gotten into that top 6. Top half. I believe one year we finished 3rd, which was outstanding. So very young team. I think when you talk about football, when you talk about soccer, when you talk about volleyball, there's a lot of youth, right? And obviously, we brought in some transfers on the football side of things that we talked about, but there's a lot of youth out there. But in talking to these coaches, that youth equates to hey, it's a quick learning curve, but then also there's a hunger there for them to do best.
You bring up an interesting point, and this probably applies to all of those sports that you just mentioned, and I'm sure you've had this conversation. Have coaches had to change the way they approach, the way they coach, because it's much more of the teams are all younger across the board. There isn't necessarily that 2 to 3 year ramp up to have that junior ready to step into the starting lineup. Have you had those conversations with all of your coaches about adapting to what maybe you learned 20 years ago isn't always the way that works anymore?
No, for sure. And again, just with rev share, NIL, and those opportunities that are out there, both ways for student athletes to leave, student athletes to come here. You really can't count on the traditional method, as you mentioned, trying to develop for 3 years. In the last 2 years, student athlete plays. I think what I know with football, and this goes back to just relationships I have out there with not just Pete Lembo, but other coaches, other administrators. The one transfer portal, has made really a difference because your team is formed in January, and then you're also seeing more freshmen coming in January, so they can take advantage of the strength and conditioning program. They can take advantage of spring ball, and then they're here, and it's not like that rush when you get here in June or whatever the case might be, and then obviously camp in August. For soccer and for volleyball, it depends, on the situation. Sometimes, maybe an imbalance in class. In this cases, I know they're trying to kind of rebalance that class, more than anything. But, it just so happened that when you look at all 3 of these sports, and I know we'll talk about women's basketball, down the road here in a future podcast, but that's another young team as well. So, you have to identify that talent and, get them ready, more than anything, and supplement them from a transfer portal standpoint, or in some cases, sometimes I can say in most cases, we'll still have those experienced folks here that can help lead the program.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's touch on basketball. You brought it up. Tickets have been on sale for both the men's and the women's side. Things are going well there. There was some basketball news that came in the last couple of weeks of the tournament seeding process changing. It jolted me when I got to look at some of the early men's basketball schedules. Like, 22 conference games. I think the Bulls are slated to play at least 2 or 3 in December. December,
Yes.
which, again, is not what we're used to. So, and I think the last part of that is you've got the men's and the women's teams. You've got George coming off his most successful season, kind of taking the steps that you knew he would be able to take on the men's side when you hired him. And then you've got Coach Sharkey with that incredible young team that she has mostly kept together, ready to take its next steps as well.
No, you're right. Obviously, the women's schedule is finalized, and the men were waiting for, I want to say, one more game, and we'll be able to get that out there. But the key point of all that is on the men's side, you do have that double round robin.
Right.
So there's a balanced schedule for all of us now that we know that, hey, certain school played Akron twice as compared to another school that played Akron once. It makes a difference. On the women's side, we're not there yet.
Still 18 on the women's side.
18 on the women's side, but I hope we have some consistency and more conversation there. So it's a double round robin on both, because now what you have, especially when you go into Cleveland, you really have a true seeding, because everyone's played everybody. So you can pick 1 through 8, everything else, and really ultimately the decision there, instead of having a bracket of 1 versus 8. 2 versus 7, so on and so forth, but have some protection of 1 and 2 is just how valuable the NCAA tournament is for us. We're not going to have, as we know, every year have 2 teams, go to the NCAA tournament, but I think what's valuable is seeding. And what helps with seeding when you're selected the NCAA tournament is, your strength of schedule. And for us to be able to have that opportunity where, say if your one does go, your one's not playing 8, and that kind of, lessens that, and then turns around and plays, 4, whatever the case might be. Now it's, you're playing some of those top seeds, right then and there, the semifinal, who you could be playing number 4 and then go ahead and play number 2. So, at the end of the day, it's about wins in the NCAA postseason, and if we can get a win, whether it's at now the opening round that's going to be at 24 teams now, 12 in Dayton and 12 in Wichita, or it's not even being part of that, but I think stats will show if you're that 12th seed or even that 13th seed, you have a much better chance to get a win rather than the 14th, 15th, 16th seed.
Last question about the seeding and the tournament changes. We lived the 2018 Buffalo men's team that was ranked all season long, went in as the number 1 seed, blew through the tournament and won it, right? And then you saw last year with Miami where they were ranked a good part of the year, and then they get upset in the tournament. Did that trigger some thinking like we need, when we're lucky enough to have a team like that, they need a better chance to get to the tournament?
I think it definitely triggered that conversation, but just some history. The Mid-America Conference, before I was here, used to have that double bye scenario in their tournament. Then they went to the straight seed. So, when you have that, and then also understand that, gosh, if Miami didn't get in, that could have been an opportunity for lost revenue for the league. So, again, you obviously have to step back and consider the what ifs, but more importantly, you have to have an eye to the future in terms of what this is going to look like and what this is going to help, and how this is going to help our league.
All right, so that'll be interesting. We've got a little time to sort of digest all that basketball stuff, but I know those teams are going to get going here in the next couple of weeks to gear up for the seasons that start in early November. All right, as always, we do this with you because you are chairman of the NCAA Football Oversight Committee for FBS, and you are in the middle of all the things that are going on. Your phone is probably blowing up on a per-second basis with everything that's happening. So give everybody a sense of what you've been dealing with. I assume the eligibility question that has really prompted a lot of conversation in the last week or so has probably been something you've talked a lot about.
Yeah, I mean, even, it goes back to something that, that discussion's been happening seriously the last, probably 18 months about what something would look like. And, as we drew near to the decision, which wasn't our decision, it was the decision of the NCAA cabinet and board to have a 5-for-5 model, the NCAA signaled in May that, hey, when this comes out, it's going to be kind of straight, clear cut, meaning no grandfathering, none of this. We're going to start whenever it's implemented. We're going to start with that class, and kids who are currently on the roster and how that could affect them positively from that standpoint. So of course, that announcement is made, and then here comes the the litigation.
Sure, as always.
Ongoing litigation. I mentioned to somebody I was talking to, it's like the hamster wheel of litigation. It just keeps going, right. and so
all it takes is somebody to not like the rule or figure they want a way around the rule, and the way to do that now is to go to court.
Or it affects their institution, affects their student athlete. Well, let's go to court. And so when we talk about change in our industry, you probably have not seen just such lightning round changes that we've had in the past 30 days from, a judge in Colorado declaring that all class of 22 student athletes are going to be eligible. There's going to be a portal created. Doesn't matter about the House mandated roster caps. They're in. And then kind of, 2 days later, okay, well, there's no transfer portal. There's no roster max. They have to stay at their institution unless they enter the portal after their previous eligibility is done, which is not going to be too many of those.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was out there, which we had a couple student athletes that fit that more narrow scope to be able to do that. But the caution there is we're still in this litigation piece. So last week or so, the NCAA was granted a stay on that injunction. So meaning that even if we did have a couple student athletes, they're now ineligible. And no telling when that will go back to trial or decisions made. It could be, for example, if we had a soccer student athlete that we wanted to bring back that had an extra year, well, now that person's ineligible, and maybe that case, or maybe it's all settled in late November, which is after the fact. So
right.
You have that, and then the one that is really catching all the headlines are you're now having these kind of local state judges that are now not doing class action lawsuits. They're doing specific student athletes. And really the headlines are, these student athletes are in NFL camps right now. Are these student athletes, hey, they already signed a professional contract.
Played in preseason games in some cases.
Well, preseason for football, but they signed a contract, and you know what? They play in the G League, or they signed a 2-way contract for the NBA. So I think that really put people in an uproar, which again, the ongoing litigation, now you had conferences, as you read, kind of step up and say, hey, we're the SEC, and you know what, we're going to prohibit institutions from bringing back these type of student athletes. Okay, the ACC followed suit. The Big 12 follows suit. The Big 10 follows suit. The Sun Belt follows suit. And, there'll be some news coming out of the Mid-American Conference following. So everyone's going to be in unison, with this. So now, again, for those institutions that might have been preparing, or for those student athletes that might have been preparing, now there's no opportunity. So who knows what the next steps are? And then I think from an NFL standpoint, they pretty much laid it out there that, okay, if you are one of the student athletes that, we let you go and you do go
back to college.
Well, and now you have no eligibility there. There's no way you can come back to the NFL this year. So you have to sit out the entire year.
Yeah.
So just I think as we look at this and lessons learned, and again, this is my personal opinion, is that, once this came out and once it was going to be defined that, hey, this is it, we're going to make this dividing line here, and we're not going to grandfather in, the class of 22, you have to move forward. Let's go. But still people thought there was a way, and who knows, there still could be a way around it where we have to get the attorneys involved.
Yeah, well, and so beyond that, what are the other big topics heading into the college football season that you have spent most of the offseason working on?
Yeah, just more so what's going to happen after the football season, what's going to happen in regards to a new calendar that's going to affect spring ball, that's going to affect, winter conditioning, opportunities in the summer for summer practices, OTAs. So looking forward to that. As we talked offline here about, how this calendar just feels different with the latest Labor Day and the history of Labor Days.
Right.
You can't get any later than that, as what was determined. That now we're going to have a unified week 1, which is what people might call week 0. So everything's going to shift up 14 weeks, prior to Thanksgiving. So next year at this time on a Thursday night, it won't just be FCS games. It's going to be everybody, kicking off. So, a lot that's happening from a calendar standpoint. Recruiting. We're looking at doing things a little bit differently than what we've done before. Which potentially allows a head coach to maybe get out a little bit more, which potentially allows us to send more coaches out on the road, but structured like basketball, where there's recruiting days rather than having these recruiting periods. So, a lot happening as we try to, reshape and form and adjust, our game to the landscape that we're in now.
All right. See, when I started this and asked you just how excited you are for this time of year, I didn't know it was such a loaded question because there really isn't a whole lot of the only change of this time of year for you is there's games, football and soccer and volleyball you can go to. The rest of the governance and the leading of college athletics has been going on since January.
But I tell you what, I mean, that's those 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever the case might be, with all the work that we put on it and put into it and all the work our staff are doing to those games. I mean, it's just, refreshing for me to just, admire the work that our student athletes are putting in, admire the work that our coaches are doing, how they pour into them. As I mentioned, like going to the band, that they're prepared for it. And then, ultimately our staff, who spent, their summers, their time. Hopefully a guy like Matt got away, a little bit, but
hopefully.
But again, it's showtime for them as well. And I can say this is, I know he's in the room bragging about him, but Matt takes a lot of pride.
Yes, he does.
In what he does, and he wants to make sure whatever he puts out there is the best he can be. And you know what? We have a lot of other Matts in our department.
Yes, we do.
And the thing about that is when you have people like that are so passionate what they do, that helps bring people, to our venues. That helps people want to support, the Bulls and understand, just the value that we bring to not only this university but to Western University.
Yeah, and again, Matt Walfrand and Michael Lose are the guys behind the camera here who make all of this work, and that's who he's referring to, and they're just two of the many people that work tirelessly to make sure UB Athletics goes off without a hitch, looks as good as it can be, and then is as successful as it can be. Mark, enjoy the start of the season. Can't wait to see you hanging out and working the halls there at Broadview Stadium in a week for the opener against Albany. It's the best time of the year, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate all you do as well.
All right. That is Mark Allnut. He is the Vice President and Director of Athletics here at the University at Buffalo. Excited to be off and running with another season of the In the Bullseye podcast.